This video contains spoilers, and I mean it this time. Watch the f***ing show.
You serious?
What? When life gives you lemons.
Nani?
No! No! No!
Psych!
Baby!
That's what I've been waiting for!
When Cyberpunk Edgerunners was announced, it was met by the internet and by me with overwhelming sighs. This mainly stemmed from the amount of negativity that surrounded the release of Cyberpunk 2077, the game the anime is adapted from. On release, the game was a buggy mess and was literally unplayable for some people.
Was this game worth it? Does that answer your question?
I was one of the few lucky people that got a functional copy for my PC, but even with it being playable, it was still bugs galore. I ended up getting so annoyed with the bugs that after about 20 hours through my playthrough, I shelved the game and haven't touched it since. So when the anime was announced and I saw the trailer, my reaction wasn't to immediately watch it. I mean, I thought it looked like a crazy Studio Trigger show that would have balls to the wall action, but not much else going on. So even after it was released, I didn't watch it, and I thought I would just work my way to it eventually. And then I got a text from a friend telling me to watch it, especially since I played the game and that it was a fantastic anime. I trust this guy's opinion, so I sat down with my dinner and decided to go for it. And I didn't move from my spot on my couch for the next 3 hours. Cyberpunk Edgerunners blew through my soul. I was wrapped up instantly in the story, world, aesthetic, and characters of this anime, and it has not left me since. When I finished it, I was a literal zombie that did nothing but think about this show. And just yesterday when I was playing Cyberpunk 2077 and I Really Want to Stay at Your House came on, I relapsed into post-show depression when I thought I had finally gotten over it.
No! No! I can hear it everywhere!
And from what I'm seeing online, the internet definitely has seemed to give this anime its stamp of approval. So how did Cyberpunk Edgerunners manage to blow so many people away, as well as make me go through an existential crisis? I have no f***ing idea, but I really want to rant about this show, so let's go. So on paper, the premise of Edgerunners is pretty basic, and is definitely something we have seen before. We have a kid from humble beginnings, David Martinez, who after a series of unfortunate and coincidental events, has his life turned around and is thrust into an adventurous new life that he and we as the audience discover together. We watch him grow and change as the series progresses. Now despite the skeleton of the series being pretty basic though, the layers on top of the plot make the show what it is, and the show really hit the ground running with how quickly it throws us into the life of our protagonist. So David, despite being from a poor background, is a student at a prestigious academy in Night City due to the efforts of his single mother. However, after his mother is gravely injured in a gang shooting and subsequently dies due to being unable to afford proper medical care, David's life is completely destroyed. This is amplified by all the other crap in the shit sandwich that David is being forced to eat in episode 1. And it was at this point in the show that I felt like Night City had properly introduced itself to the audience. Night City almost feels like another character in the show, with it teeming with life both organic and cyberized. On the surface, it seems advanced and convenient with all the cybernetic enhancements to the lives of the people living there. However, what is very quickly shown about Night City is that it is a merciless, soulless town that props up those in power on the backs of most of the people that live there and struggle to get by. The show wastes absolutely no time in showing us how pitiless and cruel the world that David is living in is, and how difficult it is to make ends meet. It's an environment that is extremely unfair and is almost encouraging you to become a criminal due to how badly it beats down on those born without privilege. So after finding out his mom was secretly running cybernetic implants to help pay for their expenses, David takes a piece of military equipment and gets it implanted in himself. And this action sets David down the path that he follows for the rest of the show. Shortly after he installs the Sandevistan, he gets expelled from school for picking a fight with his bully, leaving him with no options. He ends up encountering the netrunner Lucy, and after showing off his Sandevistan, which basically lets David move at super speed, he gets wrapped up in the world of Edgerunners, or as they're commonly called, cyberpunks. Now, cyberpunks are basically mercenaries, or criminals that run illegal jobs to make money. They perform these jobs by cybernetically enhancing themselves to keep up with the dangers dangers of the environments they're in. However, they walk a careful line, as with each implant they put in, they get closer to eventually losing their minds and turning into violent cyberpsychos. Hence the name Edgerunners, as they live fast and on the edge, with many of them eventually going over the edge into cyberpsychosis. So David eventually joins up fully with Lucy's gang of cyberpunks, led by a giant named Maine, and this is where the show really turns it up a notch. We start seeing David descend into the world of criminal activity in order to provide for himself, and how the true underworld of Night City works. And I feel that the show demonstrates this to us through the eyes of David, starting with his first job and slowly changing as the show progresses. And this is demonstrated fully, in my opinion, through the action in the show. At first, the action is super bombastic and balls to the wall with an air of ridiculousness around it. But as we get into the later parts of the show, the action scenes start to lose that chaotic fun that was present before. Just how quickly situations escalate from a harmless hangout into a full-blown shootout shows how genuinely dangerous it is to be out and about in Night City. And after a point, I started to view confrontations in this show as situations where I was genuinely concerned about who was going to get out of it alive. This change is gradual and goes on and off, but it made the anime feel differently in the sense of no one is safe. Night City is a meat grinder, and it is truly a terrifying place to live unless you have power. I also feel like the life of cyberpunks shapes the pacing of the show. When the show starts, it feels relatively slow, with how much the plot progresses when compared to the later episodes. I feel that this is a mirror of how Edgerunners supposedly live. They live on the edge, doing insane things and being a part of dangerous and exhilarating scenarios. As David gets more into the Edgerunner life, the show's pacing picks up commensurately in the later episodes. So one thing I do want to comment on in the world of Cyberpunk is the general aesthetic. The presence of huge technological advancements allows for some really insane design choices amongst the city and characters that Trigger absolutely nailed. We got guys with guns and swords coming out of their arms, jacks in their necks and backs, as well as having a bunch of unnecessary right eyes. So did anyone else shit themselves when they heard Giancarlo Esposito's voice? Like, just looking at the design of characters tells you so much about them, from the bulking body of Maine to the ganglion wild Pilar to the masked and mysterious Kiwi. Another thing that was really fun in the show was hearing the slang and terminology of the world that I'm really glad they kept in from the game.
Pea shooter like that won't even dent Maelstrom metal.
Seriously, Chum? A Satara?
What?
Hearing characters in an anime using terms that make absolutely no sense to us but are everyday terms to them really helps us feel like we're looking at a unique culture that has evolved from where we are today. And this shows especially in our characters, who end up forming the crux of the show. So at first, David appears like other anime protagonists we have seen in the past. He's a teenager who comes from humble beginnings, has an excitable nature, and somehow possesses this uncanny ability to tolerate cyberware implants. It's established early on that the Sandevistan that David has implanted into him takes a massive toll on the one using it, but David seems to be able to use it much more efficiently.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
This allows for David to spring himself into the world of Edgerunners very quickly. We then get to meet the rest of the Edgerunner crew, and I can't believe how quickly I got attached to these characters. We have Lucy, who is the first person that David meets from the Edgerunners crew. She presents herself initially as calm and collected, but with a fun and wild side that she shows in certain situations. However, after episode 2, she comes across as really cold and distant, and I was wondering why that was. Was she faking her personality initially to lure David in, or what? But it turns out she was acting differently after episode 2 because she was worried that David was really upset about her tricking him and didn't really know how to approach the subject. So this shows us that while Lucy is a full-fledged Edgerunner and is ruthless when she needs to be, she does actually have a considerable amount of empathy. David and Lucy's growing relationship throughout the show is one of, if not the major focus of the show, and I really enjoyed seeing how they played off, complemented, and supported each other. We also have Maine, the leader of the Edgerunners crew David joins up with, who, while being rough around the edges, is shown to genuinely care about his crewmates and friends. He acts as a mentor/father figure to David, which is something that David has lacked in his life since his father is not in the picture. David looks up to Maine, who in David's mind embodies a true Edgerunner, and he strives to become like him throughout the show. Watching their relationship grow from harsh beginnings to genuine friendship was one of the more enjoyable aspects of the show, and this applies to the remainder of the crew that we got to meet as well. The eccentric Pilar, the no-nonsense Kiwi, the badass Dorio, and of course, everyone's favorite best girl, Rebecca. I couldn't believe how much I came to care about these characters in the short time that this series went on for. I mean, it was only 10 episodes, which is shorter than a typical anime season. This goes to show you that you don't need a whole lot of time to create an amazing cast for an anime. You just need good characterization and writing to make an audience get attached to characters. In that way, you can rip their hearts to pieces.
I'm sorry.
So at first, the new life that David has made for himself seems exciting and cool, with him running merc jobs, making new friends, being taken under Maine's wing, and even starting a relationship with Lucy. He becomes acclimated to the life and grows more mature, creating a new family for himself after losing his mother. However, as the series goes on, we start to see just how the Edgerunner life is affecting David and his personality. And this is shown no better than through David's descent into cyberpsychosis. Throughout the show, David is constantly being warned by people about the dangers of overusing cyberware. However, because of his tolerance for the Sandevistan, David starts to believe that he's different from other people and that he will never go cyberpsycho.
Like, it's always been a part of me. I'm built different.
Oh, brother!
But as it turns out, David is wrong. He is special in regards to how much cyberware he's able to tolerate, but a high limit is still a limit that he eventually hits. And this becomes even more complicated if you read additional information about what causes cyberpsychosis. According to Mike Pondsmith, the creator of the Cyberpunk series, cyberpsychosis is a disorder that in part depends on the subject's overall internal susceptibility. Just like every person who drinks a lot at parties doesn't end up an alcoholic in the gutter, not everyone who gets loaded up on cyberware is going to automatically go cyberpsycho. He then explains that a person's tolerance to cyberpsychosis has to do with their personality. He states that it includes the subject's ability to empathize and relate with others, their ability to absorb and rebound from mental and physical stressors, and whether or not they are able to balance their worldview through other methods. This explanation shows us that the ability to resist cyberpsychosis doesn't have to do with your body, but with your mental state and outlook on life. The people of Night City live a bleak and despondent existence, and those that become Edgerunners usually do so looking to change up their lives and take back a little bit of what Night City has taken from them. However, this doesn't change the fact that they constantly have to struggle and put themselves in danger just to get by, which only amplifies the stress they feel. So living as Edgerunners does allow them to eke out almost a passable life in Night City, but the effects of the life only feed cyberpsychosis. And once you know this, it lets us see what's happening to David throughout the show. As explained by Pondsmith, at the start of the show, David had a loving mother, a career path, and no more hassle than the average poor guy in a wealthy Ivy League school. But even after losing all of that, he was able to make friends, build a replacement family, and after some prompting, even get a girlfriend. So he could definitely handle the stress of added cyberware up to a point. David was one in a million, not because of some special anime power that made him tolerant to cyberware, but because of his empathy, humanity, and positive outlook on life in an environment that usually doesn't allow for anyone to feel that way. But as David takes over as the leader of his own crew, the stresses and realities of the life he leads begins to affect his mental state, driving him to the point where he finally starts to succumb to cyberpsychosis. David's descent signifies his loss of empathy, his inability to handle the stresses of his life, and his growing negative view towards his own life. I really loved the expansion on the concept of cyberpsychosis that was introduced in the game. The episode where we watch Maine succumb to cyberpsychosis really felt like the turning point of the show. Maine was an anchor for everyone on the crew and was one of the characters who taught David what it means to be an Edgerunner. Despite his hulking form and powerful personality, in the end, he hit the end of his rope and fully succumbed to the stresses of his existence. It was at this point it dawned on me that as soon as David put on the Sandevistan and joined up with Maine, his path was set and he was living on borrowed time. So after I finished the show and was dealing with the void pretty hardcore, I thought about the question, what is Cyberpunk Edgerunners actually about? Is it about a kid from humble beginnings rise to become a legend? Is it about a kid on the straight and narrow's descent into crime and insanity? Is it about setting goals for yourself in your life and striving to achieve them? I thought about what the story of Edgerunners really is, and after talking it over with several people, we all came to the same conclusion. At its core, it's pretty simple. It's a love story about David and Lucy. A point in the show that's brought up several times is that David's life was always being set up by other people. At first, he lived to fulfill his mother's goal of becoming a successful corpo at Arasaka. After he becomes an Edgerunner and Maine dies, he takes it upon himself to become a legend in Maine's stead. However, one thing that's shown that he never loses sight of is Lucy's dream of going to the moon. Lucy is the one who brought David into the world of Edgerunners. She was the one who showed him the moon. She was the one who was putting her own life on the line to protect him. And she was the one who was able to pull David out of the depths of his cyberpsychosis. Her not being a part of the gang took a massive toll on David's psyche, showing just how much he needs her around. As David descends and becomes literally nothing more than a torso attached to cyberware at the end of the series, he is still able to keep himself sane by focusing on how much he wants to rescue Lucy and get her to the moon. And even at the end, with his defeat and death inevitable, he is still content and happy knowing that Lucy will make it to the moon. In the end, he didn't need his own dream. He was content knowing that he was able to make the dream of someone he loved a reality.
I don't want you to die on me.
I won't.
So that was a lie.
The ending of the show is depressing, we all know that. And a thought that made it even more depressing is realizing that Lucy is the only one who survives, and she is the product of Arasaka Corpo nurturing. The world they live in churns by the gears of corporations, and you either become a part of that system or you become a victim of them. Lucy being the only one to survive felt ironic in the sense that even though she is a different person now and has her own life to lead, she lost everything that mattered to her due to the corporation that created her. You can see this in how despondent she is, even after she gets on the moon by not having David with her. However, the smile she gives at the end shows that she's still determined to get the most out of her new life in memory of those who sacrificed theirs. As much as I was hoping for a happy ending to this show, as Johnny Silverhand says in the game,
"Here, for folks like us, wrong city, wrong people."
this show sucked me in, chewed me up, and spit me out. I became so enamored with the world that it showed me that I have re-downloaded 2077, and I am 15 hours into a new playthrough. 2077 has also become the #1 game on Steam since the anime's release, showing just how much of an impact this show has had on the audience. My only complaint about this show is that I wish it was longer and we had more time to explore these characters and plot. And if the only thing wrong with the show that you can say is that there isn't enough of it, you know you found something special. Trigger really hit gold with this adaptation, and this makes me more hopeful for what could come out of the cyberpunk world in the future. So thank you all for listening to my rant about Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I want to know what you guys thought about the show as well, so please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye!